What's up, guys? So I got the request to do the Pixel 6 Pro versus the 6a. So you may not need the 6 Pro or you may not need the 6a. I just want to go ahead and highlight the differences for you guys. You could save money and go with a 6a, or you could spend a little bit more if you need the extra features. Alright, so let's go ahead and just talk about the first important thing is the price. So a 6 Pro will cost you around $888 new. And then in the renewed refurbished marketplace, it actually came down in price quite a bit. It's around $600 to $551 for a T-Mobile Unlocked. I have those links down below. A Pixel 6a will cost you around $450. So it is a pretty big price gap. So let's go ahead and talk about the hardware. So they both kind of have this similar, design. It looks very close to the 6 Pro this year. As you can see, same camera module design here, even though the 6 Pro's camera bump is much bigger. They both have stereo speakers, which we will talk about. They both have aluminum frame, but the Pixel 6 Pro does have a glass back on it as well. But the plastic back on the 6a, it still feels, you would almost mistake it as glass. So it still feels like very premium. So they both feel very premium, but you do have, technically a more premium design on the 6 Pro because it is IP68 dust and water resistant compared to the IP67 dust and water resistant. As you can see in size, the 6 Pro is also much bigger as well too. So if you're not a fan of big phones, you might want to stray away from the 6 Pro. It is a pretty big phone. The 6a is definitely way more comfortable to hold here. So let's talk about the screens on both of these phones. So on the 6 Pro, you do have an LTPO AMOLED 120Hz display. It is HDR10 plus. It is a 6.7-inch display at 1440p resolution with 512 for the PPI. It is Gorilla Glass Victus. On the 6a, it is an OLED HDR display at 6.1 inches, 1080p 429 for the PPI. So obviously the Pixel 6 Pro has a much better display. It's got HDR10 plus. It's also higher resolution at 1440p. Like I said, I wouldn't really knock the 6a for the size because you could honestly want a smaller phone that's going to be more comfortable to hold. But the big thing here is the 120 Hz, right? So do you need 120 Hz on your phone? Basically 120 Hz will make your phone feel much smoother than a 60 Hz phone. So when we're doing stuff like playing games that maybe are 90 frames compatible, you'll notice a difference. Or mostly you'll notice it when you're scrolling like through the app drawer, through Instagram, stuff like that. You will definitely notice the difference. It does feel much smoother. Just the navigating the UI in general feels smoother on the Pixel 6 Pro. It doesn't really feel laggy on the 6a, but that's definitely one thing to consider. So if you want that sort of silky smooth experience, definitely take that into consideration. But it might not be necessary for you. I think the Pixel 6a is definitely still pretty smooth. So that's definitely something I would go into the store and just use 120 Hz if you never used it and see if it's something that you really like. Alright guys, I want to go ahead and talk about the CPU. So both of these phones actually have the Google Tensor chip on them. They're both running Android 12, same GPU as well too, basically the same scores as well. The difference is that the 6a has 128 gigs and 6 gigs of RAM versus the 128 gigs and 12 gigs of RAM on the 6 Pro. So you will be able to multitask a little bit better. But as far as the app opening speeds and just the overall interface, both these phones are actually basically on par with each other in terms of speed and also in terms of gaming performance. It's more so impressive on the 6a because it is much cheaper and it does beat a lot of mid-rangers with gaming performance like my Redmi 11 Pro and also the A53, A52. It is able to beat those phones out as far as PUBG settings and as far as just gaming at a smoother setting as well too. So that's definitely something I noticed there. But your gaming performance is going to be basically on par. Now, one thing about the Pixel is that, at least for PUBG, now for other games you can max out, but for PUBG you can't play at HDR Extreme, you can play at Smooth Extreme. It's one thing that I noticed, but like I said, it does a pretty good job with gaming performance on both of these phones. You get a pretty similar experience. Now you do have that 90 frames option, you know, on some games with the 6 Pro as well too, so that could be definitely a benefit if you game a lot. But I would definitely keep that into consideration. They both pretty much play at the settings, as you can see, for PUBG at least. And if you check out my gaming tests, they both, like I said, well, will play about the same as far as performance wise. So definitely it's pretty much, you know, a tie for performance, since they both have the same chip. Now both these phones have NFC. The Pixel 6 Pro has IP68 and this has IP67. The Pixel 6 Pro also has wireless charging and the Pixel 6a does not as well. So that's also something to consider. That's one of the premium features that you are missing out on the 6a is wireless charging. They both have an in-display fingerprint sensor, which feels exactly the same. It is the exact same fingerprint sensor. And it's not a bad fingerprint sensor. A lot of people say it's not the fastest, and I agree. I think, you know, Samsung makes Samsung ones feel a little bit faster. But my whole thing is that these phones don't have face unlock. That's my only gripe with the unlocking systems on these phones. But other than that, it's fine for what it is. Also, both these phones have stereo speakers, and let's go ahead and check that out and see, do they sound the same. Start with the 6A. Yeah, the 6 Pro definitely has a louder sound and a deeper bass. Yeah, it's pretty close though, actually. Yeah, it's just way more just higher bass quality on the 6 Pro for sure. Yo, the 6 Pro has always been one of my favorite speakers this year. So very impressive from the 6A, but the 6 Pro does have that slightly harder hitting speaker, which is really nice. Alright, so let's go ahead and talk about the cameras because that's pretty important. Now I'm going to show you guys the side-by-side stills. I thought it was pretty interesting because I thought the cameras were more close than I thought, but the Pixel 6 Pro does have that extra lens that we need to talk about. So it does have a 50 megapixel standard, so you will get overall more detailed shots, especially when you zoom in. And it does have a 48 megapixel telephoto lens, which the 6A does lack, and it's got a 12 megapixel ultra wide. It can shoot in 4K 60, and then you have a 11.1 megapixel ultra wide selfie cam on this phone as well too. It shoots in 4K 30, and you guys can see that 2x, 4x. Now on the Pixel 6A here, it's got a dual camera setup. It's a 12.2 megapixel standard with a 12 megapixel ultra wide, so no telephoto lens. So you can see that it does a digital zoom. It's not actually like, it doesn't have a telephoto lens, and you don't see that 4x option or anything like that. So that's one thing to know. If you like to take zoom in shots, say you do a lot of photo taking, like you're at a basketball game or something, you need to zoom in. This phone, it can zoom, but it's not going to be nowhere near as good as the 6 Pro. This also shoots in 4K 60. You have an 8 megapixel selfie cam that shoots only in 1080p 30 though. I'll let you guys see the side-by-side stills. Let me know what you guys thought. Here's the video on the Pixel 6 Pro. So 0.7, 2x, 4x, Here's the video on the 6A. Sorry, 0.6. You know what you guys think? Alright guys, so lastly, battery life. Battery life is actually pretty much on par with each other, which is surprising because, well, it's not surprising because this phone lacks 120 hertz or 90 hertz, the 6A. It does have a pretty decent sized battery at 4,410 milliamps. And it also has 18-watt fast charging. The 6 Pro, it does have a 5,000 milliamp battery, but remember this phone does do 120 hertz and it charges much faster at 30 watts as well too. And it does have that wireless charging slash reverse wireless charging as well too, which I think I can show you guys the reverse wireless charging real quick if you've never seen it. Here it is, battery share. No, I can't show you on this phone. Hold on. You can charge up earbuds or, you know, basically anything that's compatible with wireless charge. You can see the little battery icon came on. But yeah, so you can do that on the 6 Pro as well too. So it's pretty interesting. So basically I would say the 120 hertz, right? And you also have slightly louder speakers and you have that telephoto lens. I thought camera quality was actually pretty close to each other. But otherwise, like if the 120 hertz doesn't interest you, I would say just get the 6A. If the 120 hertz is a big deal, definitely I love 120 hertz, and if you take a lot of zoom shots, you're definitely gonna like the 6 Pro. And if you in general just want a bigger phone, right? But take that into consideration, guys. Be sure to let me know what you guys think, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.